Hello, everybody. I'm Helen Farrell, the Florentine. I'm very pleased to be here this evening with fellow foodie Coral Sisk of Curious Appetite Travel. Hi, Coral. Thank you for joining us this evening.
Ciao, thanks for having me.
So this idea, TF Together is all about the community, people coming together and everything. And Coral and I had a lovely lunch the other day at Le Via del Te in Via Santo Spirito. And it was so lovely talking about food and producers and everything that we were eating and drinking together that I thought, hey, why not bring Coral onto TF Together so we can continue our gossip about food and conversation. So that's what we're going to do this evening. And Coral runs a very successful company that provides tours and virtual experiences around food and everything else. Coral, maybe if you want to explain what you do at Curious Appetite and how your business model has obviously changed in recent months.
Yeah, thanks. Change is a very interesting way to put it. Uh, I moved to Florence in 2012. I have Italian heritage, and I always wanted to move to Italy. And I've always been obsessed with food. I majored in Italian studies at university in Seattle, where I moved to Florence from. And I always had the intention to work in food and wine somehow. And so I started a food blog in 2010 when I was still living in Seattle about, my reflections on Italian food culture, through my university studies. I also minored in food studies. So I was always fascinated by the Italians' approach towards food and community. And how they eat with the seasons and just like their rituals around food, the traditions around food, and how serious they are about food. And I've always been very serious about food myself. So I kind of, felt like, oh, wow, there's like my people, like they get it. And so when I moved to Florence, I continued my food blog and I wrote about my observations of like the restaurant scene and like local foods, and gelato was one of the things I noticed the most, because I was like, there are gelateria everywhere. It is like such a thing here. And I was just like so enamored by everything that Florence had to offer in the way of food and drink. And then eventually my food blogging parlayed into like kind of curated tasting tours. And then professional food writing. So I started then, pitching to like magazines, online magazines, to write about like food in Florence. So that's a bit like about how Curious Appetite got started. And then my tours then grew, and then the pandemic happened. And so so of course my main I guess audience is, from the United States, Canada, Australia, and obviously those are the people that can't travel the most. So I wanted to find a way to still connect people to the things that I love about Italian food and drink. And so I've pivoted to online experiences and then a gourmet food club, which we'll get to taste a little bit of today.
Okay. I'll be keeping you company there as well, Coral. I've got my cheese board too. But it's interesting the way that we've all had to change the way that we do our business, or try to get by, trying to survive in these difficult times. But what you offer is this real passion and real depth in what you're doing. I mean, these are not just small sort of ideas that you've thrown out as virtual experiences. They're very intensive, they're very interesting towards people. Maybe if you could tell us a little bit about, like, I know you do an aperitivo experience and there's a Negroni club. Maybe go into a little bit of detail about what you want.
Sure, thanks. No, and part of it too is like what's sad about, like not being able to host people in person is that I love being able to support these really independent restaurants and bars who the people behind them are very passionate too. So I'm, through some of the virtual experiences, we're still partnering with some like local experts here. So for example, you touched upon like the virtual mixology. And so we work with local bartenders that that lead like a virtual mixology class on how to perfect your at-home cocktail making skills, since I'm sure a lot of people are drinking at home, and for those that like they can't really leave much or go to bars much. So thought to bring a little bit of the Florentine cocktail culture into people's homes, like through the experts here that they would normally be visiting on our tours. So that's like one example of like how I've connected, a little bit of like what our tours would normally be to like a virtual experience. And they're all live and they're small group, because again, I'm very passionate about like small group experiences. And so when you're in a small group, it's more intimate, you can engage more, you can talk more with your host. I feel like with the big, when there's so many people, you don't have a way to really engage and get that cultural experience. So even though they're virtual, we still have maintained it like of it being small group.
That's wonderful, Coral. I mean, it's keeping in touch with people that's so important right now. And what you also do, I believe, is you mail this gourmet experience, so people can actually literally have that taste of Florence mailed to their door in the States or in other parts of the world, I imagine. So, I mean, what are in these gourmet boxes? I'm curious to know.
Yeah, thank you. So I had this gourmet club for a few years now, and it was a way for like after someone took a tour, they could have a curated box of these like specialty food sent to them after their tour, so they can kind of continue their culinary adventure at home. And so then of course when the pandemic happened, I was like, oh, I have this thing that I already started. I just dusted it off and just kind of started to again keep connecting to the theme. So we have a seasonal, like kind of a complete chest of like so right now we're doing a fall theme. So we have like a risotto with Tuscan grown organic rice, and then dried porcini mushrooms, since that's kind of the thing right now. So even when you're going to restaurants here in Florence, you see like lots of restaurants that are showcasing porcini like on their menu. And that's one of the things I love so much about Italian food culture, is that you have this one thing that's in season, and it'll be so pervasive throughout every part of daily life. So another thing that I'm including in our fall box is this this pecorino, which is a sheep milk cheese covered in wine grape pomace. So since I can't send people schiacciata con l'uva, which is a flatbread with the grapes, I'm sending them cheese covered in grapes, which to me is better than the schiacciata con l'uva. That's my personal preference. So
where does that cheese? I mean, it looks amazing. I wish we could do this sort of scratch and sniff experience over these things. But where does that pecorino come from, Coral?
So this is from Pianza, and so again, I could talk for ages about all the things that I love about Italian food, but more than me, because you've been living here probably longer, the obsession that Italians have with territory. So, you can have, this is a sheep milk cheese. So you can have the sheep milk cheese produced in a different part of Tuscany or a different part of Italy, and you'll have Italians fighting over the nuances of why this one is particularly better. So this is from Pianza. So we're in the Val d'Orcia. So this is, south of Florence, and it's supposed to be considered superior because of the type of herbs that grow in this area. That then gets into the in the nuances of the milk, and also this area, depending on the cheese producer, they are still producing this cheese in a certain way that has been safeguarded for centuries, because this area is indicated for cheese production, and cheese was like sheep milk cheese was a staple, has been a staple in this area for several centuries. So Pianza is special because, to me, okay, we talk about the herbs and the cheese, but to me, it makes for it's very creamy, it's very light, it's not too Barty or goaty, even though it's not a goat. It's just like the funkiness, I feel like is a little bit more subdued, just because of probably the area that it's from. It's more like the kind of herbs that makes it more of a herbaceous style of sheep milk cheese. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, that sounds wonderful. So I mean, you're digging into your cheese there. I'm
Yeah.
gonna have it in mine here. So I'm everybody knows I'm normally like huge Tuscany first person and everything else. But Coral says, let's eat cheese together. half an hour before we go live. So I have Grana Padano DOP in my fridge. So we're not from Tuscany here, but we're from Emilia Romagna. Maybe, I mean, this is I think it's a reserva. It's 20 months. So I'm really I had that in the fridge.
Okay.
Maybe if you could explain, maybe, because you're an expert on these things, Carol, the difference between what you're eating and what I'm eating.
Sure. So this is great because I think Grana Padano gets a bad rep because it's kind of like considered, you know, the stepsister of Parmigiano Reggiano, which is like considered the king of Italian cheeses. So Grana Padano is it's similar to Parmigiano Reggiano because it's made from cow's milk, and it's aged for several months. The differences between, well, the key difference between what I'm eating and what you're eating, different territory, different terroir, what they're obsessed with here, what the animal is eating, but also clearly the milk itself, because it's coming from cow versus sheep. I think what's interesting to know is like the differences between Grana Padano and Parmigiano Reggiano. And so Parmigiano Reggiano is more precious compared to Grana Padano. It doesn't mean that it's superior, because it all is in the eye of the beholder or the palate of the beholder. Because Grana Padano is aged for 9 months minimum, and for Parmigiano Reggiano is 12 months. Although you'll typically find 18 months, 24 months, 36 months. Like you have the Grana Padano, which is 20-month age. It wasn't the minimum. But also there's more regions that are permitted to produce Grana Padano. There's 5 Italian regions that can produce it. Whereas with Parmigiano Reggiano, there's only 2 regions, Mantova in Lombardia, and then of course in the Emilia Romagna. So does that answer your question, like a little bit of the difference?
Yeah, I mean, you're a mind of knowledge, Coral. It's wonderful. You've got recall on you, which is fabulous, which goes to show, how great your experiences are. So I know that because you do what you do, you've always done like this tour in Bologna, right, as well, which is something that I've always wanted to experience, because Bologna, is the capital of Emilia Romagna. They call it La Grassa, the fat one, for a reason, because it's got its tortellini and it's mortadella and all of these amazing things. So thank you for answering that question. It's very savory, this cheese as well. It's very and it's got that nice sort of crystalline thing going on. The texture's pretty cool. So maybe we should move away from the cheese, because I think I could end up eating a lot of this otherwise.
Oh, I know.
But so, Carl, maybe, we're sort of, laughing when we're talking around food, which brings joy, and that's what food should be around. But, these are tricky times, no?
Yeah.
And, we don't quite know. The Italian government is going to be announcing new measures probably this evening, new restrictions. What's your feeling of the restaurant scene in Florence at the moment?
So it's interesting because I understand a lot of restaurants are worried, and it's really, it hurts to see them that way, because they put so much love and passion and grit into what they do. Anyone who owns a restaurant is not doing it because they're getting rich. It's very, very few people that are getting rich off of a restaurant, but really it's because they love what they do. And so it's just heartbreaking that it's already difficult to run a business on a good day. You have massive overhead. You have high expectations to meet. People are persnickety. You have to please everyone that comes to your door. You have to deal with food and food waste and management and recipes. There's just so much you have to manage. And then now it's like they have reduced capacities, for being indoors, which, these things need to be done. I'm not saying that I'm complaining about like, oh, well, we should just be all cramped into a restaurant. Unfortunately, we have to adapt to what's happening. And so, on the one hand, they're suffering and they're having to let go of staff. They're having to furlough staff, and they don't know if they can stay open. Although the only thing that I would offer in terms of a piece of like, I don't know if this is comforting or like a bittersweet like consolation, is that, in the US right now, it's so bad for restaurant closures, because I feel like in Italy, landlords are a little bit more humane. It's a little bit easier to get by because they're not as astronomical compared to a city that I recently spent a lot of time in, which is San Francisco, where apparently like they're projecting, 65% closure rate for the restaurants, and since being, I was in San Francisco during, like in the, the first couple months of the pandemic or the lockdown. And then being back here, I've observed that thankfully it's just been a matter of like restaurants having to pare down and not necessarily having a ton of closures like what's happening in like the US. So I don't know if that that offers any sort of solace, but I have a lot of hope that it'll be really tough and there'll be a lot of dark moments for Florence restaurants. They'll just have really, really tough times. And I just hope that they stay open. And the way that they can stay open is to support them as much as we can. Even if it's just like getting, a primo, just getting one dish or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's not for everybody right now to afford going out to restaurants too. So it's like it's a domino effect.
It's true. I mean, it just cascades over. I mean, one of the first things I did as soon as lockdown was over was, go to an institution. I went to Sergio Gozzi and I was just like, got to have lunch, because it's important to support those places that really make Florence. I mean, what would our city be like without certain institutions where we always go? So it's true. We don't, what little money we all have, in many ways we have to try and be generous towards people who make that difference to us. So I mean, that does make a lot of sense. I mean, in terms of places right now, Coral, I mean, I'm sure you've got we don't normally name drop on the Florentine, but let's make an exception. Let's do it.
Yeah.
So where are your go-to places, the places that you would recommend, markets, coffee shops, restaurants, places where you go for a panino, simple food as well. Where are your top places in Florence?
All right. So coming to my mind asking that. So I love Club Culinario d'Osvaldo, Club Culinario Toscano d'Osvaldo. It's in Santa Croce. It's a really special place to me. It's kind of off the beaten path in like the historical center. They have a Tuscan emphasis, but the owner chef was the son of a pilot. So he traveled around Italy growing up, and he developed like appetite, for, kind of forgotten dishes around Italy, and kind of mining his friends' grandmothers for the recipes to then showcase at the restaurant. I think it's a really special place. I don't feel like it's enough attention, and it should. So there's places like that I feel like a little underrated that we should be giving some love to as well. And then then there's Gozzi as well. I love Gozzi, Ristorante Fagioli, which is also in the Santa Croce area, which is very much representative of like the La Cucina Povera Toscana. So which is like the art of, peasant cooking and not wasting anything. I think that if you want to understand like the whole Cucina Povera, Ristorante Fagioli and then also Sergio Gozzi are good places to go to. Then of course Sabattini for La Vera Cucina Povera is there. It's like one of the few like blue collar eateries left in the center where you can eat super cheap. And then Semel for panini, which is in Sant'Ambrogio Market. That's like a little hole in the wall, and he's self-proclaimed the purveyor of the best panino Italiano in the world. And you go there and you're like, you don't only get like a gourmet panino that could be filled with snails or donkey or pasta, but you also get like the soulful interaction with Marco, which is very, very priceless in my opinion. So in terms of coffee, there's so many, and I really have to give a shout out to Ditta Artigianale, because they're the first specialty coffee in Florence, and I think that created the path for other specialty coffee purveyors to kind of take root in Florence. And I feel that Florence is such a fascinating place to be eating and drinking right now. And being from Seattle, I'm obsessed with coffee. We have a huge coffee scene and coffee culture. And so with Ditta Artigianale, of course, is like the, I guess the mecca for specialty coffee. Then you have Coffee Mantra, which is in Sant'Ambrogio, which is great for specialty coffee. Melelucha, which is off the Lungarno, also sort of near Santa Croce. And then I like kind of the old school joints too. So like Revoir and Chiaroscuro, Gili. You can't like ignore the old school coffee places, even if they're not like doing, V60 and, like craft roasting. Oh, Cafe Pianza. Oh my gosh, why am I forgetting them? Cafe Pianza is fantastic. Now they have, but for the longest time, they were outside of the historical center, but now you can go to their coffee shop in Via Gioberti, which is another underrated foodie avenue. I really encourage people to go check out. There's tons of delis and forni and cafes.
Serafini and all of those amazing places. And then there's the various sort of tripe places, the tripai and everything else. And this is like, we could just talk for hours about food.
Yeah.
I think one of the interesting things in recent months has been seeing the collaborations that have come out between various people who maybe got outdoor space and restaurants that don't have enough tables to cope with the restrictions and everything else. And that's, I think, it's going to be interesting. It's going to be harder in the winter to come up with these creative collaborations. Yeah. I think it really does give cause for hope, though. I mean, you want to talk a little bit about some of those interesting creative collaborations that have popped up around the place?
That's a good question. Okay, so like one thing I noticed was when I was first here in the summer, I'm still trying to understand what will happen with restaurants that can't like do outdoors. Well, not that they can't do outdoor seating; it's just not very desirable. But I've seen, for example, Cuculia, which is a really, have you been there? It's off of Okay, like it's such a gem. Like they do very creative cuisine. I think that they're very brave to kind of deviate from like the traditional Tuscan, and like they're not really quite Michelin, but they're trying to be creative, sort of like Michelin. But they're like, so it's like this. It's an interesting concept they're doing. But they are collaborating with like bartenders to do like cocktail pairing nights and stuff like that, or like music. I remember they were doing some sort of fundraiser night where they did like like orchestra music and with their food, and they're raising money for a cause. So I'm seeing things like that so far. It's still left to be said, like what more we'll do. But like, for example, Mad Cocktails, the cocktail bar, Mad Souls and Spirits. I know that they were doing a collaboration with a pizzeria next door. They were doing like a pizza and cocktail pairing. Mm-hmm. It was like an aperitivo where you could get like a pizza that was paired specifically with a cocktail in mind for that pizza. So like a carbonara pizza was like paired with some sort of like pisco sour or something like that. But like their spin on it, because they're mad, right? They're crazy. So they're going to put something fun and tongue in cheek. So I'm seeing like stuff like that. If that answers your question, but
no, it's true. I mean, I saw the other day that En Cucina Giapponese, it's like a sort of an accessible sort of homely Japanese place. They're doing a pop-up at Dita Artigianale, this sort of thing. And Dita's always been, and our friend Robert, who does the Wild Buns Bakery, I mean, he's been popping up at Dita and Italy and other places. I mean, it's good to see when you've got like the big boys like Italy as well, helping out and making sure that small local bakers and restaurants actually get a space in a big company like that. So I mean, it's on every level, right? That we have to sort of space for everybody and helping everyone out. So we'll see what comes next. What about you, Coral? What have you got planned for the next few difficult months? But I'm sure you've got some ideas in the works. What can we expect from Curious Appetite?
Yeah, well, I think I'm just trying to digest a little bit more like what is happening with the food scene and like the restaurant scene here too. Like just trying to eat out as much as possible and write about it. I'm pretty active on my Instagram account, so I'm always like sharing like something delicious that I personally found around town. So I'm trying to, get back more into writing and blogging, and like also like some, local focused material too. Cause I think that I've always sort of written like restaurant guides that kind of appeal to like both locals, but also like the international community. But like I mentioned to you before, like, trying to scope out like the best, budget wines from the grocery store. If, like you can't always afford like the fancy bottle. Trying to like use a little bit more of my sommelier training that now that I can't do in-person tastings, try to focus more, of course, on the virtual offerings. This one that we did recently that was super fun was a food and Amaro pairing online. So we did all these digestivi and then picked cheeses and some salumi and chocolates to go with each one of them. So like more of these sort of like really niche style tastings, not just like typical like cheese and wine, which, you know, of course, you know, we do, but I love the like more the deeper parts of like the drink culture. And I'm obsessed with digestivi and amari, things like that. So I guess if that answers your question, just more booze and eating around town as much as we can, as long as, you know, as the restrictions don't prevent us from going to restaurants and bars.
Well, we're in Italy, so any which way, I'm sure there'll be access to food, because I mean, throughout lockdown, it was one of our sole joys, was the, and for me, one of the greatest aspects of the whole lockdown situation was reconnecting with local producers. You know, I don't live in the middle of Florence. I live just outside, and we're surrounded by cheesemakers and small wine producers and farmers. And Flavio, La Valle del Sasso, hi Flavio. You know, he kept us going with his meat packs from his animals, which I went to visit after lockdown, you know. So it's this thing about, actually, we are learning strangely from this weird experience, sorting out our value system. So, you know, people like you, Coral, who've always cared about where food has come from, you know, I hope it will bear you in good stead for the coming months, you know, and you know, and I'm sure we'll be seeing one another out and about in town anyway. But you know, thank you for joining us today, Caroline. If anyone's got any questions, you can write into us while we chat. We enter our last 5 minutes.
Oh yeah. So yeah, was there any questions that I haven't checked them?
We've got people saying, yes, supporting local restaurants, even one meal a week will help the owners. So thank you, Michelle, for writing in. And Michelle, I hope we managed to solve your problem from our previous TF together. I know we weren't able to solve it on the air, but I hope we managed to solve it off the air for you. Cheryl says, great conversation. I miss Florence so much, and I miss these classic places. So that's why we need to support them, right?
Yeah.
And then we've got Georgianne saying, love this. Thank you for sharing. So there's people tuning in from all over. And we're all food lovers wherever we are in the world. So Coral's got you sorted for the coming months. You know, order one of her gourmet boxes, and you can have a taste of Florence in the States. Join in one of her virtual experiences, and you can be knocking back a Negroni or two made from the best bitters and liquors that the city has to offer. So, Coral, do you have any words you'd just like to say to wrap up our conversation today?
Yeah, no, well, thanks for having me. And I think what you said is spot on about why it's so important to like protect the classic places, or like the old school, because I've been noticing, I mean, I'm not from San Francisco, I was living there, that a lot of like the old school places, whatever was left, because, you know, the city has just been sort of revamped, I guess you could say, because of the tech industry. And so the beloved places that are left are closing. And so like Florence has, of course, been affected by mass tourism, which is like compromised like a little bit of, you know, these family run places because of soaring, you know, rent costs and overhead. But these places help to define the identity of the city and why we love that place. And so I think to leave on a note is just like, you know, it's important that we give them agency in whichever way we can. Even if you can't go there, to recommend to somebody, you know, try to consult, you know, like I'm sure you guys, you know, have lists on your website. You know, I'm happy to help and give suggestions to people. I manage my Instagram page, so if anyone needs any dining recommendations. Plus, there's tons of bloggers in the city too, and we're all really here to help each other. So yeah, I have a lot of hope for Florence, and I think that the community here is great. And I think it's wonderful what you guys are doing to help to create like some cohesiveness between kind of like the movers and shakers, but then also like, you know, giving shout outs to local businesses. So I think as long as we stay together and, you know, keep promoting and helping each other, that we'll get through this.
Thank you, Coral. One last question, and I'm sure you
Sure.
have the answer to this. Alison asks, any updates on Camilo?
Oh, okay. I was thinking this because that's one of my favorite places. I was like, why did I not mention Camilo? That is like in my top five. I love Camilo. I was there no, I mean, they have, the thing is that they have a lot of space inside. So they're a little bit lucky. And I went there recently and had a gorgeous frittata funghi porcini. So simple, but amazing. Fresh porcini. This is a great year for porcini, by the way, from what I've been hearing. So yeah, Camilo's fine because they have a lot of tables. So you have to think about like the little tiny places in the center that have reduced capacity and they were already small to begin with. So like Osteria Vini e Vecchi Sapori, Trattoria Sostanza. I mean, these are historic places that have really small seating. So I think they're going to be filled, but if there's a way, I don't know, to order from them or go there during lunchtime or going there on an off day too, because the weekends are always going to be busy. Maybe just try to plan, your restaurant outing on like maybe slower days.
That's wonderful advice, Coral. And let's all bear that in mind and help our restaurant scene, help our food scene in Florence, and help all the producers, who make Italian food what it is. We would be nowhere without them. So please do go and have a look at Coral's website, see what experience she offers. There it is. It's popped up on your screen, and it'll be there in the comments on Facebook and on YouTube. And we'll see one another very soon, Coral. Thank you all for tuning in, and see you next.
Ciao, Helen. It was so nice to speak with you. Thank you.